Welcome everyone to our Hot Buttons Communication Skill Managing Tough Conversations Lunch and Learn. I'm going to open with prayer, and then Elise Willer is going to introduce herself and take it away. So let us pray. For the beauty of this day, for the beauty of being together and learning, for the gift of Zoom and digital community, we are grateful. We are grateful for so much more, and pray that our conversation will be blessed this day. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Jerry. Hello, everyone. It is a delight to see you all. For those who I haven't seen before, including this lovely chair that has joined us. My name is Elise Willer. I work as a mediator, and as part of that role as mediation, I've actually spent the last couple of years offering trainings and doing small gatherings just like this one, helping people and giving people a lot of the skills and materials and concept and tools that I use as a mediator to help them navigate their own negotiations, their own difficult conversations with just a little bit more ease and grace. I happen to be the daughter of two Lutheran ministers myself. My grandfather was a minister in the Northwest Ohio Synod, and so I'm quite familiar, or at least a little bit familiar with where you all are. And I have so this is just all this to say is that this is just a delight, and I'm really excited to spend these moments with you. So I think, does everyone give me a nod up? Head yes or no? Does everyone know each other on the call, or does it make sense to do a quick round of introductions? Yes, okay, let's do that. Maybe Sherry, could you manage the process of introduction, since I think you might know more folks than I do.
I sure can, and I will just go around my screen because I think that's the easiest. And Phil, we're going to start with you.
Hello everyone, I am Phil Snyder. I'm a community liaison with Arrowhead Behavioral Health here in NAMI. I'm also serve as the Vice President of Church Council at Trinity Lutheran Church. So this whole topic is pretty near and dear to my heart. And I also serve on the Faith Council.
Thanks, Phil. Jean Emery.
Jean Emery, I am a layperson, a member of Glenwood Lutheran Church, serve on the call facilitating team, as well as the Walking Together team, which is a conflict resolution type of situation.
Yeah, thanks, Jean. Janine Grimm.
Hi, I'm Janine, and I also am a layperson. I'm synodically authorized, serving in interim ministry. My team partner for that ministry is Bob Noble. He's on this group also, and we're serving at Christ Lutheran Church in Dowling, where we do indeed have difficult conversations in the past and future.
Thank you. Joe Zielinski.
Hi, I'm Joe Zielinski. I'm Vice Chair of the Multi-Faith Council of Northwest Ohio. I'm on the Mental Health Faith Council as well with several of these people, and I facilitate a group called Sacred Threads Spiritual Living Circles here in Toledo.
Thank you. Jennifer Wolf.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wolf. I work for the Lucas County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and I'm also on the Mental Health Faith Council.
Thanks. Robert Noble. I've never called you Robert before. Bob.
I wasn't sure who you were talking about there for a minute. I don't know why it says Robert Noble. I'm Bob Noble, and I serve with Janine at Christ Lutheran Church, doing a team interim there. And I'm also the pastor at Calvary Lutheran Church in Northwood.
Thank you. Mary Satterfield.
I am a member at Solomon Lutheran. I'm a layperson, and I'm also a call facilitator, and in fact, the chairperson of the call facilitation team.
you. Cindy Ritter.
Hello there. So I'm sitting right here at St. Mark in Toledo, where I'm doing pastoral care ministry. And then I'm working with Mary Satterfield over at Zion Latcha as a part-time interim there and doing some part-time interim work at Martin Luther. So I wear my roller skates and eat my Wheaties every day.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Dennis King.
Hello all, I'm Dennis King. How do I introduce myself? I'm retired, but I'm not retired. I work with the team interims. I've worked with Janine through a couple of team interims. I'm taking a little bit of time off. Elise, I'm waiting for the birth of a third pair of identical twins.
Oh my God.
These are going to be boys. My daughter, we're trying to do everything we can to help her get to 37 weeks. We're at 25 and she is big. She's to the point where she's not going to be able to do much for the next 10 weeks. So we're going down there every week. Makes it a little hard for me to do the interim work that I was doing because we go down there and babysit because she has a 5-year-old girl who has things right. This little 5-year-old says, Mommy and I are going to go shopping and Daddy's going to take care of the boys and he's going to call us up and tell us to come home as we help. So she's a pretty wise little girl.
Thank you, Dennis. Gretchen, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Gretchen Hyatt. I'm the parish nurse at Grace Lutheran. Oops, did I? Oh, yeah, okay. Parish nurse over at Grace Lutheran on Monroe Street. And I'm also attend the Faith Council meetings too.
Thank you. Donna Martin. Sorry.
Hi. Is there like lizard without the L?
All right, gotcha.
I work at the Thomas M. Werner Center for Mental Health Recovery downtown. And while we can't talk religion necessarily, spirituality is very important to a lot of our members. So I thought this would be very helpful. And I'm on the board at Unity of Toledo Spiritual Center. So I actually know Joe from the times he's been there. So.
Well, welcome. Glad you've joined us. Charlie, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. So Charlie Hughes, I'm with Northwest Ohio Psychiatric Hospital here in Toledo, and I'm the Director of Clinical Services.
Great, welcome. And Patrice.
Hi, I'm Patrice Powers Barker with OSU Extension in Lucas County, and I'm with Family Consumer Sciences, which some people recognize as the old home economics. So we're just trying to help families live healthy.
Thank you. And I'm Sherry Krieger, coordinator of the Mental Health Faith Council, and I do work with the Bishop of the Northwestern Ohio Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which is a mouthful, but I am really, really glad that you are all here. And that is everyone.
Great, thank you very much. So last time, so months ago, we introduced ourselves and we spent a little bit of time talking about how it is possible that people sometimes from the same families, from the same communities can come to such different conclusions from one another and why it can be so hard in the moment to explore other people's perspectives, especially if they differ very differently from your own. Not a problem at all if you weren't with us last time. We are going to spend a little bit of time building today on that particular conversation, but in a way where it doesn't matter if you weren't with us last time, you'll just jump in. Because today the focus is on building the muscle, if you will, of curiosity in the hardest moments, in the moments when emotions are running high, when the conversation feels really important to us, when it is just the hardest to even explore anyone else's perspective. And then we're going to do that. We're going to go to the gym, if you will, in kind of developing that genuine curiosity by doing an exercise that I love. It's called hot buttons. I'm going to share my screen here in a second and explain how this exercise is going to work. And then we're going to put you all into small groups. You'll do the exercise once. We'll come back together. We'll debrief. We'll talk about how it went. And hopefully we'll have a chance to run the exercise even 2 or 3 times, giving everybody an opportunity to sit in that hot seat and kind of think about and work towards getting that practice and developing that curiosity. So let me share my screen. And I will present so you don't get all of the extra stuff. So if you think about a conversation, especially one where there's a lot of disagreement, we generally see 3 different skills show up in that conversation. So the first skill is inquiry, right? It's this idea that you're learning about someone else's point of view, and statements and questions that follow from an inquiry often have a purpose of, learning, trying to discover, understanding someone else's perspective. In difficult conversations, there's a second skill that shows up, and that's around acknowledgement, which is all about confirming what you've heard. So checking your own understanding and helping them feel heard, even if whatever they're saying doesn't necessarily, you don't agree with. The third skill in difficult conversations, the thing that comes out, is advocacy, which is sharing your own perspective. And when you're trying to share your perspective, you're often trying to teach someone else something. You're trying to explain your point of view or why it is that we should do the thing that you think that we should do. You're trying to persuade them of something. So if you had to give percentages in your difficult conversations, what percentage of your conversations are like your statements are advocacy, persuading other people, teaching other people, explaining concepts to other people? Take yourself off mute. What percentage of your difficult conversations are advocacy?
I think there's a tendency for me to get right to the advocacy thing too soon and spend a lot of time there. That's one of the reasons why I'm taking this. I try to spend some time in the inquiry. And if I do that, then I remember to spend some time in the acknowledgement piece, because I've done some training in this area before. But in a difficult situation, I tend to spend more time in the advocacy piece than I should, I think. So probably somewhere well over 50%, when I'm sure the first part should be close to 70% or more, with the advocacy being less.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting some nods. I think you've probably hit the nail on the head. I think everyone else agrees. And that does resonate with the experience that I have, both in mediations and offering these trainings. And typically when I ask that question and people do some real serious thinking, they say things like advocacy is anywhere between 50 and 80%. Then comes inquiry at anywhere between 15 and 10%. And acknowledgement gets really, really tough in difficult conversations. And that's totally fine. And I think I would agree with your hypothesis, Joe, and that is, if it's possible to get curious, if it's possible to spend more time in inquiry and then inevitably in acknowledgement, it has the potential to shift those difficult conversations into learning conversations, which help then push us and move us into more productive communication. And so that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to do that here with this exercise called Hot Buttons. In a moment, you're going to be put into groups of 3. Each person in your group of 3 has a role. One person will play the role of the inquirer. The inquirer has 3 jobs. They're going to, 1, identify a topic from a list of hot topics, which we'll brainstorm in a moment. Don't worry about that. 2 is they're going to convey to the group in a very short, concise manner what their perspective on that topic is. And then once we move into the exercise, the sole purpose of the inquirer is to try to get curious, to understand the perspective of the second role. So one other person in the group is going to be playing the role of the speaker. And the reason that it's difficult, it may be difficult for the inquirer to get curious about the speaker, is because the speaker is going to purposefully take the opposite point of view than the inquirer holds, and they're going to advocate for that opposite point of view, even if they don't agree with that point of view. So, for example, if I was the inquirer, I might say something like, Italian food is the best food on the planet. And because that's the perspective that I hold, the speaker is going to advocate the opposite perspective. So they're going to advocate that Italian food is the worst food on the planet. And so as the inquirer, I would need to get curious about the speaker advocating that Italian food is the worst food on the planet. The third role in this exercise is going to be the coach. The coach is watching the inquirer, right? The inquirer is the one who's in the hot seat. When the inquirer notices, when the coach notices that the inquirer is no longer asking questions from a place of curiosity or from a place of inquiry itself, they'll pause the conversation, point that out to the inquirer, and then the inquirer will just jump right back in, attempting to get curious again. And I'll do a demonstration in a second, because sometimes these different roles get a little bit complicated to follow. But before we do that, I do want to spend a little bit of time brainstorming what like hot topic conversations. And so I'm going to pull up the chat function, but what I'd really love to hear is from you all. What are the topics, the hot button topics that are showing up in your conversations, in your work, in your worlds today?
Of course, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask is big.
Yep.
Right along with vaccinations.
Mm-hmm. And I can do that. I'll do that too. So there's specifically COVID vaccinations as a topic. And then I have been a part of plenty of conversations where just the topic of vaccinations in general is a hot button topic. Other things.
I was thinking specifically COVID vaccinations for right now, but yeah, vaccinations in general could be a hot topic too.
Mm-hmm. Bob, I saw you take yourself off mute. Is there a hot topic that you wanted to add here?
Oh, really? So I think the reason that I'm here is for a separate congregation that I'm helping out with. And one of the things that we're really working with is pastors as a hired hand as opposed to spiritual leader. And so it's kind of a respect thing. I also think that my partner gets treated. I never thought I'd say this, but she gets treated differently than I do. And that's going to be a hot button. Yeah, the role of the minister. Very good. See?
Role
Yeah,
of the
role
minister.
pastor. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that right? I just want to make sure that I capture
Oh, that's
that correctly.
perfect. That's perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Donna, I saw you also took yourself off mute. Do you have something else to add?
Yeah, politics.
Yep.
That's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
I just usually choose not to talk about it at all because I start getting riled up and yeah, so I just back off.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up. I know that in brainstorming hot topics, it does feel like the energy has shifted. I can start to feel people feel a little bit jumpy even thinking about the topics. That means you're doing it right? That's what I'm looking for. And my hope is that once we get into these small breakout groups, that everyone's going to have an opportunity to be the inquirer. And it's just hard. It doesn't matter who you are. As humans, it is hard to get curious about perspectives that we don't agree with, especially if they feel like there's a lot riding on them. And so from that perspective, even if you disagree with the person that's in your group, I find great comfort in knowing that we're all just human and we're all here to get better at these things. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, even though it is uncomfortable. Other topics?
Sort of along the same lines, we went through, especially last year, the Black Lives Matter. And then I think, the gender, homosexuality, transgender topic.
Mm-hmm. And I've got race relations and gender, and I understand that, sometimes the bigger topic isn't the issue, but there's something very specific that becomes the issue, right? Like, should our elementary school have a transgender bathroom or something like that? And so feel free, if there's a more specific topic that you feel quite passionately about, feel free to bring that into the conversation.
Well, this sounds terribly broad, but the role of the church in today's society, in small outlying communities, often the hot button is whether or not sports teams should have games on Sunday morning when there's limited worship opportunities and things like that. So there's a clash that goes on all the time. And that's from the church's point of view, but from the people's point of view, what is the need for the church to infiltrate our culture today? Is there a divine right for the church to do that or not? How far can we go with our local school boards and school systems in trying to push our point of view? And I say that from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Can the school house an after-school religious program? That's a biggie in Northwestern Ohio right now.
Yep, nice. I'm trying to capture as many of these as possible to give you as much choice as possible later. So religious after school programs, great. Donna, yeah.
Just differences in religions and faith practices in general.
Absolutely.
That's come up occasionally. Although it's interesting, I find a little bit, like as an example, I find actually it'll be a little bit easier to be an inquirer in that subject, whereas I have difficulty in others. So like
nice.
Politics.
So, I mean, for you in this exercise, the exercise, you get the most out of the exercise if you really engage with a topic that, like you're pointing out, that you have a hard time engaging in. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that feels too hard. So, if it feels just a little bit easier to do something like getting curious about difference in religion and faith practices, that's a place to start. It would be, in the debrief, what I would love for you to be thinking about is, why is it and how is it that you can get curious about people who have differences of religion and faith practices like what mental capacity do you bring to those conversations, which is so difficult in conversations around politics. Might be a really interesting kind of journey and self-awareness there. I do want to add abortion is a topic that I have often heard as being an issue. And then just issues around women's rights.
Elise, I'll add one. Some churches really disagree on how their monies are to be spent.
Nice.
Just put money. Money is an issue.
Nice.
So can you hear me on this?
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
loud and
thank
clear.
you. Great. Just a different topic, and I hope we're seeing a major cultural shift, but maybe if individual athletes have the right to put their personal physical and mental health over what sponsors or a country or the others might think they have an opinion on. I don't know how to phrase that.
I'm just gonna name it.
Well, I would like to name other women then too, if we're doing that. I mean,
Sure.
I'm just saying it's not just Simone Biles, but certainly others in other sports that we've seen within the last probably 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can either name them here, or I can capture that somewhere around, like there's an interesting conversation around mental and physical health and role or purpose or duty. Is that?
Oh, that's interesting too, even when we talk about roles of other careers, what people think we should be doing versus what we're able to contribute. I don't.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna name these as individual ones. So I'm gonna put mental health up there. I'm gonna talk about roles. I'm gonna talk, you mentioned duty. Interesting. You said country, which obviously brought my mind to what was happening in the Olympics, but to country, to family, to organization, to company. Yep.
Thanks.
Nice. Yeah.
Legalization of marijuana and other drugs.
Yep.
About dealing with people who have mental illnesses or struggling with a mental illness. The whole question of, do you associate with them? How do you treat them? Thinking of those that are maybe bipolar or have some kind of illness that causes people to struggle in their relationship with them. Do they have a relationship with them?
So if I were to capture that as mental illness, and then in parentheses, I have treatment, inclusion, and relationship. Does that feel like it captures that topic?
I'm gonna add stigma.
Yeah.
That's the field I work in. So yeah, that's a big word.
Great. In looking at this list, can everyone identify at least one issue that they feel very passionately about? At least one. Very fine if you can find more. I just want to make sure that there's at least one for everyone. Great. Perfect. All righty. So with that, I'm going to add one more, which around climate change, which is another one that tends to get discussed a lot at the moment. So with that, I'm actually going to ask one person to volunteer for a quick demonstration. I'm going to demonstrate the Inquirer, which is kind of the hard role in this particular exercise. So as the speaker, you get to have fun. And then everyone else in the group is going to play the coach. And we were doing this demonstration just to make sure that we understand kind of the logistics of how this exercise is going to go. So who would like to be my speaker?
I'll volunteer unless you have somebody else who's volunteered.
Nope, Joe, that's great. Thank you.
And I'll pick a topic that's not on the list, so it won't disturb the list later.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. And actually, you're going to play the speaker. So in the exercise, it's actually the inquirer that should choose the topic.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yep. So I'm gonna actually choose the topic of climate change.
Okay.
And so as the inquirer, I choose my topic. So it's climate change. I convey to the group what my perspective is. So my personal perspective is that climate change is real and that it is significantly impacted by human behavior and has been. So that's my perspective. So that means that, Joe, you're going to take the opposite perspective as the speaker.
Okay.
So you get to advocate that climate change isn't real and that it's certainly not impacted by human behavior. And it's my job as the inquirer not to convince you of my perspective, but to just try to ask questions to understand your point of view that you're playing in this, or not playing in this particular case. For the rest of you, as fun as it would be to just sit back and watch me struggle through this, your job is to play the role of the coach. So you're watching me. When my questions start to turn into leading questions, I start to use advocacy masked, or I start to use inquiry masked as advocacy, just pause the conversation, just take yourself off mute and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Alrighty? Okay. Joe, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Joe, I would love to hear a little bit more your views on climate change, actually.
What climate change?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Would it be right to say that you don't think climate change is real?
Well, I think there's a lot of things going on with the climate, but I think, we've had ice ages in the past and volcanoes and imploding meteors and all kinds of other things that have explained things that have gone on the planet. So I think we're just going through an interesting cycle.
And tell me a little bit more about how you came to that perspective and that point of view.
Well, if you look into evolutionary data, evolution tells us, all the dinosaurs were killed off by some kind of cataclysmic thing. And that happened, and there were no people around creating that. We've had ice ages, all the Great Lakes were created by an ice age that sort of carved out basins, and then they filled with water when some of that ice melted, and that retreated to the North Pole. And now we've got the Great Lakes. These things move in cycles, right? And we're in another cycle. And so that cycle is just changing things from what we're used to. And maybe there hasn't been a cycle like this for a long time, but humans have only been recording history for about 10,000 years, and we only have decent weather reports for maybe 100 or 150 years. So I think a lot of this stuff is just people get excited and because they don't like what's happening.
It sounds like you're convinced by the science of, from the age of dinosaurs and how our Earth came to be formed now. how is it possible for you not to believe the 99% of scientists that suggest that climate change is real now?
Well, I think the scientists are focusing on a limited time period. You know, the Earth is, you know, geologists tell us that the Earth is, you know, hundreds of millions of years old. You know, dinosaurs 65 million years, so a long time ago. So the Earth has been around a really, really long time. But the science around this climate change stuff has been developed in only the last few years based on limited amounts of data, I think.
Joe,
Okay.
I'm going to pause. Yeah, I'm going to pause you right there. Nicely done, all. That, yeah, you caught it. Definitely not a curious question. If anything, it was a leading question. I felt like Joe responded quite well. But the goal was not to learn more about his perspective or how he viewed science, right? It was to put him in a corner.
Okay.
So when you're in your breakout groups, coaches, if you're not sure, right? Because sometimes questions are just a little bit of both. There's some curiosity there, and then there's a lot of advocacy there too. Just feel free to pause the conversation and just ask the inquirer, was that a curious question? Was that inquiry? And it may pause the inquirer, and they may say, no, it really was genuine. So inquirers, that's just a moment, like a data point, that something about that question didn't feel curious to someone else in the group, which is just something that you can do your own internal reflection on and how you're structuring your questions. Or in that situation, you might note the advocacy and say, yeah, I wasn't very curious. Not a problem. Just jump right back into the exercise where you left off. Phil, not a problem. Have a good rest of your day. Alrighty. So I think with that, I'm gonna go ahead and put you into your breakout groups. For ease, don't spend a lot of time kind of deciding who's going to be inquirer, who's going to be the advocate, who's going to be the coach, because we're going to have time for everyone to rotate through all three of the roles. So the quicker you get into the exercise, the more you get out of it. And I have one amendment to the speaker role. It can be really fun, just like Joe did, to just be as obnoxious as possible, and that's awesome. And the focus of this and the purpose of this is to actually put the pressure on the inquirer. So the longer your statements, the less curiosity your inquirer has to bring to the exercise. So if you make your comments quite short, annoying but short, it puts the inquirer in the hot seat more often. Alrighty. All right, so give me 30 seconds to make sure that these breakout rooms are, let's see here. Ready to go.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, what's up?
What if I run out of questions?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know where to go with this conversation.
I think that in moments, for example, if someone that you were talking to, if you found them to be incredibly interesting and you wanted to know more about them, you would have a never-ending amount of questions for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're just stuck, you don't even know where to go, mm-hmm. Do what you can to lean into the excitement and all of the various different questions that you would bring to a conversation in true curiosity.
Okay.
Alrighty, here we go. I will do my best to visit as many of the rooms as possible. let's do, I think I'll have you out in your groups for somewhere between like 6 or 7 minutes, and then I'm gonna bring everybody back together, okay?
Quick question. Should we rotate roles while we're in the group? Or just try to do one session where we got 6 minutes to just focus on one topic?
That's a great question. Yep, let's just do 6 minutes with only one person in the Inquirer seat. And then I'll bring everybody back together and we'll talk about how it goes, and then we'll put everybody back out in the groups and rotate roles. All righty, here we go. You should have something on your screen to accept to put you into a breakout group. Hey, you're on mute.
Oh, you left me out, I said.
I did. I wasn't sure if you wanted to be added.
That's okay. I can banter with you or jump in and out.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, did you want, so you've seen how this is supposed to go in this first round. Do you want to check in on maybe room 1 and room 2? Sure. Oftentimes the hardest thing that happens is the inquirer doesn't choose a topic that they're passionate about, or they let the speaker decide the topic, and the topic really needs to be something that the inquirer thinks.
Okay.
And then again, they get a little bit confused about, am I supposed to be advocating or asking questions? So it's just getting those roles clear.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. 1 and 2. Alrighty.
Yep. Hello, hello.
We're back again?
Hey, we're back.
Yep, you're in the main room right now, and everyone else will automatically join us in 12 seconds, and we'll have a chance to talk about how that went, and then we'll put everybody back into groups again. There's Charlie. There's Pastor Dennis. Hello, hello.
We're here. We're back. Did everybody have fun with that? Huh?
I want to know why I'm the only person eating.
I ate something. I ate a little roll.
Oh, good. Okay.
I had a piece of toast earlier, so you're not the only one.
Once I heard there were breakout sessions, I hurried up and ate my lunch.
Alrighty, how was that?
Harder than we thought it would be.
Tell me more about that. Like, why? What happened?
Got tense.
Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
I was the inquirer. I did have a hard time coming up with some questions, but there was a couple times I had to like stop and bite my tongue because I was like really disagreed with her opinion. But I thought it's just going to be it could just turn into an argument if I responded the way I wanted to. Because it's like trying to convince somebody over to your own opinion. And if theirs is strong enough, they're not going to do that. So I had to back off and not say anything.
So Donna, if it's helpful at all, next time you can be the speaker and you can also practice being obnoxious.
Okay.
It's true.
Well,
I
tried not to be obnoxious because I would have jumped.
You know, and part of that is because you were prepared to be non-confrontational, and my role didn't have that limit on it. And I think that happens in our normal conversations that we have with people in our congregations, is that we as the leaders are prepared in some manner. And so we become the non-confrontational. We are careful about the questions we ask, while the people we're talking to don't need to have filters.
Mm-hmm.
Janine, that's always not true.
Isn't it?
It's not always true. No, you are wrong.
Should I add that to our list of hot topics?
Okay, coaching.
Jean, the leader is supposed to be ready to be non-confrontational. They teach us that in seminary.
Oh, well, I guess that class didn't get attended.
That is the power differential of leadership and particularly pastoral leadership or faith leadership, is that when we hold the power, we are the ones who respond and are in control of that relationship in some respects. However, being in the position that I am, I could identify with Donna, and I could identify with the other Dennis, who was having trouble with the questions, right? Mm-hmm. And the genuine curiosity of why that person thinks the way that they do. I'm a trained social worker too, right? And I'll shut down, or I'll like be quiet, and I'll manage that relationship, but it won't be a genuine curiosity to get into that other person's perspective, which draws them out, and that we can actually learn something. I think when we shut the relationship down by not confronting or not continuing to be curious about what is really motivating that person, because we believe so strongly about what we believe. That makes sense.
It makes sense, Gary. And I think what happens is we don't want to listen to what that other person, the negative that the other person is lifting up, and we want to go right to resolving our differences. Mm-hmm. But the way to resolve our differences is to bring the person over to our side, and there's no communication skills are terrible. So this is a good exercise because it forces us to really listen and not try to resolve the differences, but to find out where that person's really coming from. And it's very challenging.
And Denny, a personal anecdote is that the closest person in the world to me, besides I'm an only child, so it's my husband, but I have a cousin who's 16 days older, and we grew up 2 houses apart. And I noticed that our relationship changed because I took this more, the attitude of the Inquirer. My training kicked into gear, and it stopped our relationship from being the genuine relationship it would have been if we would have had an all-out knockdown, drag down last November. Okay. In other words, sometimes I think we have to clear the air. I'm never sure it's appropriate with a congregational member, but but just to know that this can be a real artificial way to try to create relationship with somebody. So it can't be about creating a relationship. It may be about maintenance of some sort of stability within the group. I don't know. Elise, what's the dynamic at play?
Yeah, so I think this is a really fascinating discussion. And I want to be really clear. The purpose of this exercise is not to replace the conversations and the way that you're having conversations. The purpose of this exercise is, number one, to just put you in a safer space and kind of show you what happens in your own body when you start to show what happens when you get into disagreement. Do you shut down? Do you get more aggressive? Does that heat build in your belly? Does it heat build in your fists? Where is it? Because when you notice those symptoms or signals, that's important information. Number one. Number two, I do find that there's a need for a varied conversation, a conversation that has advocacy, inquiry, and acknowledgement. That's human, right? That's how we come to decisions. If everyone were to spend all of their time in curiosity, nothing would ever get done because no decisions would be made. So I want to be really clear. I am not suggesting that all of your conversations from here on out should be only conversations where you're using the skill of inquiry. I am suggesting, however, that typically when things get tough, when emotions rise, when we start talking about topics that are really important to us, everything that we know about getting curious about the other, about acknowledging and understanding their perspective, literally goes out the door. And that's because we want to convince them that they're wrong, sometimes it almost feels like it is counter to our own identity to let that other perspective have airtime. Like if I am someone who adamantly thinks that climate change is a crisis and that we need to find a solution yesterday, then to even give Joe's perspective airtime feels like it's countering that importance, like it's countering my commitment to that perspective, my own perspective. And we know that if climate change isn't your shtick, then you're sitting here going, well, of course Elise needs to understand what Joe's perspective is. Of course Elise needs to know how he came to those opinions. Of course we need to know where he's getting his information from and why he thinks that. That's very obvious. But in the moment, we lose that ability. And so this exercise is an exercise of just giving you an extra 30 seconds of curiosity, building an extra minute of curiosity for more questions. That's all. So that you can make a choice. Does it make sense? Is it time for you to offer your perspective and your point of view? Or is this a time for listening to the other person? Because I want you to be able to make that choice. I don't want your emotions to have you in that moment so that the choice gets made for you.
Got it.
I'm going to put you back into breakout groups again. If you were the inquirer, you are now the coach. If you were the coach, you're now the speaker. If you were the speaker, you're now the inquirer. So let me say that one more time. Inquirer, you become the coach. Coach, you become the speaker. Speaker, you're now the inquirer. Remember, it's the inquirer that chooses the topic because they're in the hot seat. And for inquirers, I'm going to offer you just a bit of advice. If you find yourself in a situation where you can't find another question, you're just having a hard time, then I want you to give your mind, give your brain a roll. If you were a journalist and you were writing an article about the speaker, and in 5 minutes, you needed to be able to explain their perspective on whatever topic you're talking about, what questions would you need to ask to honestly portray and understand, or excuse me, and communicate that perspective. Sometimes giving your brain an actual role can help you gain just a couple more seconds of curiosity. Okay, I'm gonna open all rooms again, same rooms, switch roles. And I had a chance to visit room 3 and 4. So now I'll have a chance to visit rooms 1 and 2 in this round.
Since I'm the speaker this time, can we go longer than, I'm joking.
Oh, no.
Yes,
Okay, so,
Janine, yes.
so now we know who the minister is in the group there.
All righty, here we go.
Okay.
Cool. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. How did those groups do?
Yeah, well, we had to shift some. There's always some shifting around because people get confused by the different roles. It happens in every culture. It's either the way that I explain things or it's just the exercise. But it doesn't seem to take away from how powerful the exercise is. So
it is, and they're engaging, which is good.
Yeah.
All right.
So you're gonna take room 3 and 4, yeah? So similar, typically in the second round, there's less need to just make sure that the roles are right. And in rounds 3 and 4, it's just making sure that the coach feels that they've got enough confidence to stop the conversation and check in if they hear advocacy instead of inquiry.
Okay, can do.
Cool. All righty. I see some smiles.
Burning.
Did
we chased you right out of there, didn't we?
Yeah, it was really interesting. The advocacy just sent me going. Yeah. For inquirers that were using this idea of being a journalist or like giving yourself a role, let me go back. Did any of the inquirers attempt to use that piece of advice, giving themselves a role? Yeah. How did that go?
Not well.
Yeah,
and
it
you
didn't
know what?
seem to work. Yeah.
So it's something that doing that, and after you pointed it out, I realized that's what I do. I am non-confrontational in almost all my conversations with people. I don't ever tell them where I stand on a topic, not until well into the topic. So in other words, I kind of let them go and form a relationship first, and then later on, I might say, well, you know, I feel a little differently about that.
So were you supposed to be the inquirer in that exercise?
I was,
Yes, you were.
But the job in this breakout was for you to pick the topic that you know, so how did you do that if you never introduced the topic?
Well, I introduced the topic. I simply asked the speaker for his opinion on that topic, opened up the conversation, but I didn't state how I felt about it.
I'm gonna pause you right there. Bob, before I jumped in to kind of clarify that, if you had to guess what Janine's opinion was, even though she hadn't said it explicitly, do you think that you could have come up with do you think you could have given what you thought her opinion was?
No.
No?
No.
Donna, what about you?
Probably not easily.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. When I walked into that conversation, I feel like I could have given you both sides. Like the questions that you were asking felt to me like they were certainly questions, but it did feel like you were offering a perspective in the questions that you were asking.
Later on, but in the very beginning, no. But as the conversation went on, like probably when you came in, they were leaning a little bit more one way.
Okay, interesting.
But throughout the beginning, no. So that's basically the way Janine said she works, is open up the conversation and introduce the opinion later.
Okay. And so what ended up happening then is that I just jumped into the conversation once the questions had started to shift. Janine, it sounds like you hadn't said your perspective outright, but the questions themselves were starting to lead in a specific direction because of the opinion that you had. Interesting. Well, I'm noticing the time. It's 12:48. I do want to throw you guys back out so that everyone has a chance to be the Inquirer. I want to give you one last piece. Sometimes the idea of, a role just doesn't work. So another way to think about this is your job in that moment, when it's hard to come up with questions, when it's hard to be curious, is to just focus in on the person themselves. Who are they? Where do they come from? What do they do? Answering the question, like, who are they as a person and how do they relate to that particular topic? Alrighty, so I'm gonna put you back into your breakout rooms, play the role that you haven't played before. Again, Inquirers, you choose the topic, you give one sentence of your perspective, speaker take the opposite point of view. And remember, speakers, the tighter your comments, the more pressure it is on the Inquirers to get to ask questions. Okay, here we go. How did it go in room 3 and 4? You're muted.
Jean had a hard time. She was asking questions, but kind of like, well, why wouldn't you want to volunteer? Volunteering was their thing. And so trying to turn her towards just being interested in the speaker, she had a hard time doing that. And then when I did say something about that, Joe got a little, he's like, oh, are there 2 coaches here? I'm doing my job. I'm like, okay, I'm out.
Okay.
The others, Jennifer's really good. She was very good at asking genuine questions.
Yeah, I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So where do you want me to go?
Are Janine and Bob a couple?
No, they're working together right now in a church together. Yeah.
Right. They said partner and I want to clarify. Okay, I'm going to do room 2 and 3. Why don't you do room 1 and 4?
Okay. Can do.
Hi, everyone.
I have a quick question for you, Elise. So if you're in, oh, wait a minute. Okay, if you're in a meeting and somebody asks you your opinion or perspective, and you don't really think maybe you should share it, is it best for you maybe to lead off as the inquirer and learn more about them before sharing your own?
So I think my first answer is probably what's the purpose of the meeting? Right? So if you're in a meeting to talk about X and you get asked about Y, I think there needs to be, I think taking a time out and having a quick conversation on process and on the meeting itself, it'd be really helpful, especially if it's going to be a hot topic, right? Because hot topics take longer periods of time. And so if you've got a 30-minute meeting and you get asked about a topic that's going to take 4 hours to discuss, then there's a check-in there.
Right, right. Because
Um,
pastors often interview, especially interim pastors, and they're speaking with church councils and they fire different questions at you. And sometimes you already know what they're going to ask you. You know, your perspective is different. And I'm just curious if you really kind of try to seek their perspective before you share your own, you know?
Charlie, thanks for joining us. Yeah, I do want to acknowledge that it's 1 o'clock, and so if you need to jump off for other meetings, please do so. We will see you. Hopefully, we'll see you in a month. I have a little bit of extra time, so happy to stick around and kind of answer and keep the conversation going. But I do understand. So I think in that particular situation, again, it comes back to the purpose of the question. Those questions aren't inquiry. Those questions, they have a very specific purpose. My guess is advocacy, not so much around the topic, but so much around what the answer it is that they're looking for. And so getting really clear about that, both for the people in the congregation and for the interim minister and pastor, could be really helpful, right? So can you give me an example of what a question that might get asked?
A lot of people will say to you, Pastor, how do you feel about the 2009 sexuality study? That is something I've been asked many times. I'd really like advice on how to respond to that question.
Honestly,
how do you feel about the 2009 decision?
What I've learned to say is, well, what I usually say is I'm comfortable with it.
Is that how you feel?
Yes, it is.
So you're just comfortable with it.
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay. Well, then that's a good answer.
That's what I say. But
I mean, but I don't think you should. I don't think you should hide your passion about, because now I'm taking advantage of the fact that we're friends, and I know how you feel about the 2009 decision. I don't think that you should. I think that you should be the passionate advocate for the 2009 decision that you are in all circumstances. And you should not worry about what the church council is going to think about your own personal reflection on that. That's my opinion.
I agree with them.
Because then you become a much more effective leader to them.
And do you already know?
Because you're authentic. You're being authentic with them.
Pastor Cindy, have you, in asking that question, are we aware that you already know where the congregation stands on that decision?
Well, because often it's a rural congregation, and I'm assuming that many rural congregations are more conservative.
So time out, because not everyone on this call is ELCA and might not know what the 2009 vote means. So that is language in the Lutheran Church that we had discussions, and we have a social statement on human sexuality and ordaining gay and lesbian pastors, and then also marriage, same gender marriages and relationships, and how that is lived out in our church. So that's what the 2009 vote is about. And so, you know, we're living kind of across the board. We have folks on all sides of that reality in our life. And so that comes up in conversations. So I'm wondering if that the answer to your question, Cindy, depends on what the meeting is, right? In an interview, it would be different than a one-on-one conversation with a member who is you know, either wants to debate you or really know what you think. I would
I'm just saying it comes up all the time.
Sure.
And I'm just curious if when they ask it to you, if you give it back to them to find out their perspective before you, not to say I wouldn't still share my perspective, but to give them the opportunity to share first.
I often
Maybe
do.
the question, sorry, maybe the question back to them might be, you know, how do you understand the 2009 decision? How do you understand that?
That's
and
a
then
good,
go from there.
Yeah.
So I think that the opportunity to explore another person's perspective is extremely important if you get the feeling that they're not going to be able to hear your perspective anyway, because what they really wanted to say is something like, I think that the 2009 decision is contrary to what it means to be Christians, and I don't want to be associated with someone who thinks the 2009 decision was anything other than that. If you get the feeling that that is actually what they wish to say, but that's not appropriate to say, and so they're just saying, well, what do you think about it? Then yeah, I think it can be a really powerful move to say, it sounds like from your question, it sounds like you actually have a fairly prominent position on this. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about that? And if they really are on the edge of their seat about it, they will. The other option here is that you just name the dilemma, right? The dilemma is you've been asked a question about a subject that you actually feel quite passionately about, given what Bob just said earlier, that you're happy to have a conversation with them about your position. And at the same time, you want to get to know them better. You don't want this particular topic to prevent any type of a future relationship from having. And so you are looking to them. How do they want to proceed?
Yeah. And because it does kind of take over the atmosphere of the room sometimes. That one question and that one how you answer it can make a difference with that meeting big time. Fortunately for me, often it's in a mock interview, it's in an interim interview. I do feel if it was the real interview to be the called pastor, I don't think you'd be, in some cases, called back for the second interview, but that's okay, because that might not be a good fit for you.
And that's going to be the other place, is about the question around fit. And again, that all goes back to what is the purpose of the conversation that you're having. If the purpose of the conversation is fit, then it makes a lot of sense for you to be, number one, extremely authentic to yourself and to your passions, and to find a congregation where that fits. I have to say, sometimes fit looks really strange though, right? A couple of years ago, I was working with ExxonMobil, oil and gas company, and my colleague had half of her head shaved, was in a married relationship with another woman. And I'll tell you, she connected with the men on that oil rig like I've never seen a facilitator connect with anyone. And I would guess, I don't know for sure, but I would guess that the majority of the men on that oil rig probably didn't think that she should be in a relationship with another woman, not to mention her hair should never be cut the way that it was cut, right? So all this to say is fit goes deeper than any one issue. And so if you want so if in kind of trying to figure out what that fit is, giving a little bit more time for other topics is important before you bridge the topic of human sexuality. That's something to consider.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
I kind of heard Cindy say that often discussions in groups begin from the standpoint of advocacy instead of inquiry. That they're often a persuasive statement that people make, or a statement that's meant to teach somebody who they are or what they're about in kind of a disruptive manner. And most of us here respond as inquirers, you know, looking for more information. And is that the best way to, because I mean, we get a lot of this on Sunday mornings or Tuesday nights, you know? It's called, I'm going to take the pastor to task.
And
So
how do you
did
feel
we-
about that?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
What is the best method of entering a civil conversation like we had here?
What is it that you want?
Sometimes I want to be heard and understood, and I want to be able to answer a question without being judged before I've really had time to explain it.
Yeah. Because we're human.
And do you think they're asking the questions that way because they don't feel heard and they need to, I need to let you know what my thought is. They're coming that.
No.
And so part of it is, okay, I hear you. And I'd like to, I mean,
Well,
Jane,
I
you
wish
hit that on the head on the nail. And I'd like to respond to you and share what my thoughts are.
Well, that's what I'd like. I'd like to hear what's going on inside the head instead of just a blank statement and then wanting a clear go forward from the group gathered.
I think especially on this question in our church, and I apologize to the people who are not Lutheran, but I think yes, I think that question gets asked so much because they want to be heard on this subject. They've been deeply hurt by the change. All you have to do is go back to watch the video of when the vote takes place and take a look at Bishop Hanson's face when he realized that, and then what he had to say afterwards, that people who for the longest time were in the inside looking out now find themselves on the outside looking into their church. This is going to cause a tremendous amount of stress in and amongst those people. And and the challenge has been, how do we pastor to them? And because our opinion, our feeling is very different from theirs, but we still have to shepherd them. We still have to love them. We still have to teach them and preach them the love of Christ. And it's been extremely challenging. But don't give up your authenticity, Cindy. And I don't mean to pick on you in the group.
No, and you know what, I always let the people know I respect their perspective, and I always explain bound conscience, and
Right.
And I always let them know I can love them whatever perspective they have. We have different life experiences. We have different
Absolutely.
things been taught in churches. I mean, I give them, you know, the how do I say it? I just let them know that I can love them no matter what their perspective is. And you know, sometime you want to talk deeper about it, I will say we can certainly do that. So I certainly try my hardest to let them know that no matter where they stand, I'm comfortable. So, and then that's taken me years to just be comfortable in that place. I mean, that's been a long, trying to think. I mean, you know, I've had a son who's been gay since he's 19, he's 36. So I've had lots of years of personal life experience. And I do think that I have grown more mature in my responses or wiser in my responses over the years.
And Pastor Bob, I wasn't referring necessarily to what Cindy was speaking of. And Patrice, were you going where Cindy was coming from, or did you understand what I said, I guess, or meant? I'm talking about in general.
Oh, yes, I understood. I understood what you're talking about.
All right. Thank you.
So I actually think this is a really cool, moment here. I believe all of you that you do understand one another and that you hear one another. And I find that a lot of times in conversation, when we say, I hear you, I understand you, it's not enough. Going one step further and saying something like, Jean, if I understood you correctly, there are moments when it would just be really nice if it didn't feel always like you who were looking to understand everyone else, but that someone else was offering you, like someone else just wanted to hear what your thoughts and opinions are. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Yes.
Goes one step further in creating, both in modeling communication patterns, but also in just the communication itself, confirming that understanding, right? And that's the acknowledgement piece, which we haven't spent a ton of time about, spent a ton of time on, but just something to keep in mind as you are having these conversations. I find that piece, when I'm talking to people who are repeating themselves, who they're saying the same thing over and over and over again, and I feel like I got it, dude, I got it. Like that's the piece that I'm missing. And I haven't done a ton of conversations specifically on the 2009 issue. The two conversations that I have had between people who were significant, like disagreed significantly on that, it did come to that acknowledgement piece, like that there was something about just having each side verbally confirm understanding of the other that brought that energy back down.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad we're having these conversations. You're giving us new tools and new ways to think about things, and looking forward to what the next meeting is.
I think one of the things that's interesting about a topic like that one specifically is that on some level, because it's been a critical discussion within your church leadership, you have some facility, I think, in understanding the ladder of inference that the congregation, who is still where the church was, even though the church has now taken a different position, they built a new ladder. But the people in the congregation may still be having that old ladder of inference, and nobody's taken them through the new ladder. It's been done at a leadership level, and it's not from the congregation level. And maybe the congregation needs somebody to help deconstruct their ladder of inference and bring them over to the new ladder and help them build up the new ladder, because they're still over here and wondering why nobody still feels this way, because this is what I was taught for 20, 30, 50 years, and now you're switching gears on me. And up until the time of this vote, I was still with the people who were on that side of the vote, and now there's this vote and everybody's over here and I'm not there.
And therefore you have a whole another Lutheran church.
Yes, yeah. And
Off of that.
my friends in the Methodist community are struggling with the same issues. And I feel the same difficulty, particularly this last year when we've been experiencing so much demonstrated gun violence. You know, the whole topic has been pushed by advocates on either side of the polls, and the solution at the end of the polls is never the solution. And yet the gun rights advocates can't speak to the gun control advocates in a common language.
Or vice versa.
And it becomes a very difficult discussion because we need to do something, but most of the things that are proposed are not things that anybody in one camp is willing to even consider, because there's a total lack of understanding in the discussion, and nobody's taken that apart where anybody can get together and find common ground. And so we only talk at the ends and we never get to the middle.
Well, I agree with you, Joe, that there are still at least 2 ladders. The goal of this conversation is not to build a new ladder or to switch ladders, but to have conversation from both parties to be heard and to be curious about.
Yes.
Simple curiosity, not the switching of perspective.
Right.
And that's different for most of us, I think.
Yeah, because all that has to take place before you can advocate for anything, because you can't have a good advocacy discussion until you actually understand the other person's point of view.
Or come to a completely different solution. That's
right.
not from one ladder or the other,
right.
but together we build something completely new.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
We're starting to lose folks. I think it might be time. Cindy, thank you so much.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks for sharing, everybody.
Yeah. Great.
Really nice. Yeah. Really great session. I'm looking forward to the end of August.
August 26th is our next session. Yeah.
And I'll send an email out. I have a quick request about seeing if it'd be okay to do a time change, but I think I'll ask that in an email, perhaps, Sherry. That way we don't take up any more time today.
Will we get the recording, Sherry? And
yes.
Annalise? Okay. Alrighty, great. Thank you.
All right. Have a great month, everybody.
Bye, Joe. Bye, Jennifer. Bye, Jean. Bye, Mary.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Janine. Bye, Pastor Dennis.
Bye-bye.